What surprised you about our service?
It doesn't feel like anywhere near an agency.
What were the main processes that changed, like working with us versus like what you had before?
It's the time commitment is virtually the same, but the revenue as percentage of sales from email Q3 of last year compared to the previous year was up 500%. I honestly think I should have done it sooner.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for joining us today. This is Daniel. He's been working with us for the last, I want to say close to like 6, 7-ish months, probably a little bit longer than that, going upwards of a year for sure. And he has a really nice brand that he's been building for the last couple of years, primarily in a home niche. And, it's something that's been growing every single day, I'd say, honestly. And yeah, I mean, if you'd like to share with us, Daniel, what exactly your brand is and, how you guys scale it. And more importantly, how you guys are able to get from A to Z, that would be great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Like you said, my name's Daniel. I have an e-commerce brand. I started the brand in about 2020 and been growing every year since then. I come from a background of ads, so that's what kind of got me into the e-commerce. And I saw an opportunity within the home niche. I specialize in home goods, home products, and have one main hero product, but a bunch of other supplementary products. Been doing that full time for a few years now. We've been working together maybe around end of Q3 of last year and getting into full swing with like Q4 of last year, which is has been pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And like funny thing is even the way Daniel started working with us is he actually came in through another brand that we work with as well too. And like, what were you doing before you had the brand? You used to work with the same company. It was a copywriting company, right?
It was more of like, I want to say a different style of marketing. So the guy that referred me, my buddies, we used to work together at a starter company called Golden Hippo. The buddies that referred me, he worked in copywriting. I worked in more like the ads side of thing, the marketing and funnels. And I actually used to be roommates with for a long time. So he's a real good friend of mine. Yeah, of course, I trusted his expertise and I was not disappointed. So far it's been a good gig.
Awesome, sweet. And yeah, just in terms of like baseline growth from starting the business and more importantly, getting it from, okay, a base dropshipping business that everyone does to actually turning it into a full-on brand where you get to have inventory, where you get to have that tens of thousands of customers are like loyal to you, that are coming back every single month. Like, what were the main incremental steps that took you from like starting there and then obviously now years later being here?
Like I said earlier, my background was in mainly ads and Facebook ads specifically. And then I worked for another company only using Facebook ads. But having that experience, you kind of don't know exactly what you're going to get yourself into when you try e-commerce dropshipping. It's a bunch of avenues that you could be good at one, which I was good and familiar with the advertising and Facebook ads. But there's a whole nother different avenues that as a business owner, you don't really know what you're getting into until you actually do it. And you kind of have to learn also. You don't have to be great and excellent, perfect, but you have to be good at those other avenues and inventory, product, conversion rate optimization. Of course, one of the huge ones is email marketing, converting customers that would not convert on your front.
Around like July last year, that's when we first started working. You guys are still doing like well into the 6-figure amount per month, but virtually no revenue coming from emails, 2.8% from emails. And then I guess that's where, your friend obviously suggested us. And then fast forward to September, which is only about like 2 months really, we were already at like 13% or actually 15%. So a little over 13% within the first 2 months, which is great. And now fast forward to now, we're obviously sitting at a nice 25%, especially in Q4, we peaked upwards close to 30%. Main thing that I just really wanted to get from you and ask you is like, what were the main processes that changed like working with us versus like what you had before? Because I know like before we started working, you didn't really have a whole lot of systems in place. You still did have something though. It's not like you guys didn't have nothing.
Yeah. So what I was saying earlier is you don't really know what you're getting yourself into, and then you have to learn and they have to be good. But there is definitely a point where almost every brand gets to where your efforts are not going to be nearly as effective as an expert's. So the trade-off is you don't have time, you don't have the time to learn, time to implement. You can have a small system in place, which can get you by and save you, like you were saying, emails were about 5% of my revenue compared to having a professional, somebody who is on hands, works with you and still stays within your brand's identity. That is where professional takes I don't know. It's just like almost like a no-brainer. There's a certain point every brand has to kind of offset, hand it over for growth.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of times most people they overlook that fact just because they're so used to being the operators themselves and they got to a certain point just by themselves and they think, "Oh shoot, why am I going to give up like extra money or extra room for me to implement myself when someone else could just come in and do that same thing?" But in reality, by doing that, it frees up your time to do what you're good at, right? So obviously in your case, you're not going to go out and hire an ads agency because you come from that background. But now email marketing, you don't necessarily come from that background, right? So it's in your best interest to either bring on an expert or more importantly have someone embed into your team. And that's one thing that I want to also dive into it as well too, like your process in terms of time commitment when it comes to working with us. Because like a lot of times, like for example, even with us in my experience, whenever I work with like select agencies and stuff, I have to spend like starting off anyways like 5-6 hours just getting things into the mix with them. But more importantly, like it's the ongoing time commitment of like, oh, I have to constantly tell you, oh, let's change that, let's fix this, let's do that and stuff. But like I'd say for us, like it's been probably one of the more smoother ones for sure, because it comes down to, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working, just follow the data. I was like asking this question, like how much time do you really spend like working with us, actively working with us, like giving feedback, making changes and stuff, and how much of it's really like hands off and sort of done for you?
That's a good point you bring up because when I was doing the emails myself, it was probably, now that I'm looking back on it, it was taking almost the same amount of time for me to make one campaign email as opposed to having the campaign set up for a whole week, email flows, and also new strategies implementing for the future. So for me to make one campaign, and then hence why it was email was 5% of my revenue, as opposed to the same amount of time I check being in the loop with you guys about what we're sending next and what route we're going. It's the time commitment is virtually the same, but the revenue as tenfold, 15, 20-fold.
It really just shows in terms of the actual work itself, because like within a 4 month, I believe we got you up to 25% within the 4 months of us working, because that was leading right into Q4 definitely helped a whole lot, and that's like another huge needle mover where like, you know, getting set up in like Q2, Q3 is probably the best time to do it. Even Q1's great because you're well ahead of the curve, but like getting it set up just in time for Q4. So you're going to be scaling up your budgets and you want to make sure that you have everything set up in the back. You're actively like making money from your customers, because that's where customers really come back and make most of their purchases every single year. But yeah, no, that's obviously great. I mean, obviously I'm glad that we're able to work with you for the last like 6-7 months going on onwards of a year. And we've definitely hit some really good accolades, but based on like the current results so far, like where do you see the current increase in your businesses and maybe even potential decreases of your additive time? Like, do you see yourself like doing less work in the business as it scales? Do you think you're going to apply yourself in like different areas like Google, Meta, maybe even like different strategies within email? Like where do you see yourself in like the next 6 to 12 months with the business and yourself?
One thing that, you could have a plan for, and then obviously things change at a different, depending on whatever the business needs at that point. So in the next 6 to 12 months, I do see the benefit in actually having a team like this to be professionals and fine tweak all the results as far as like emails. Using that as inspiration, I've hired new video editors. I've hired new customer service agents to kind of offload that workload for me, because as a business owner, there comes a time where there's not enough time in the day to basically do all these customer service, emails, accounting, ads, all that. So it is more use for your time to find professionals to do the job as opposed to doing it yourself, because then the business isn't growing if you're doing the jobs that take this little time out of your day. And it's also really hard, at least for me, to switch gears from one thing an hour and then another thing, another thing, another thing. So outsourcing and hiring people to do those jobs is really where the business has potential to grow in the next 6 to 12 months.
100%. Yeah. Just getting yourself out of it and applying more pressure towards the needle moving things. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, like last question that I really always wonder and I always wanted to ask is like, what surprised you about our service? Did you have like any misconceptions about working with us prior to? I know you came in through like a really good friend referral. Normally, like this question sort of goes out the window, but I still love hearing like what was probably the most surprising aspect of our service.
I think it does not feel like I'm hiring like an agency or somebody just doing my stuff, getting it out there, okay, here, boom, boom, boom. Logistically, we're going to give you 3 emails per week. It doesn't feel like anywhere near an agency. I feel like you guys are part of my entire team. I feel like your interest is in my business growth, which it's really hard for somebody to actually find somebody to work with their business and have what seems like the same goal as a business owner, which is like the business's growth. That's one of the things that probably still surprised me at this day. It feels like you guys are really invested in the business growth. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, no, but a lot of times, like, that's probably because I have a lot of friends that work in different agencies, but more importantly, it's like they have their set SOPs and they're like, "Oh, we need to follow this down to our core. If you can't, then, we can't work." It will work for the better of your business, but is it gonna work for the better of you, your workflow, your team? Not necessarily, right? Because then you're sort of bending to other people's situations, right? So that's why for us, we always try to find, like, a situation where it's beneficial for both, but more importantly, like, the main number one interest is the success of the brand, right? Because as long as we're able to, make you guys money, make sure KPIs are up, make sure everything's doing great, then that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Aside from that, I really appreciate you joining the call and obviously sharing your experience. It's always great to like, get a few brand owners on the call because it offers a different scope, a different perspective from one another as opposed to like, individuals like myself that are like on the back end working specifically only on the retail or sorry, the retention and the email side of things. Last sort of thing is if someone was on the fence with working with us, like what would you tell them in regards to our workflow and how likely are you to recommend us?
For somebody who is on the fence, because I was as well, there comes a point in time where you're not giving off control, you're not giving off things, but you kind of have to, in a sense that it's impossible to do everything. Your brand as a whole cannot be successful without other people's help. Seeing that, it took a little bit for me to kind of release that control, be like, okay, you know what, I have to hand it off. But that's really the only way a brand can see growth, unless you can work superhuman hours and
Yeah. And make everything 20-hour days and just pull everything yourself, which I've definitely seen people do, but then it has that toll on them eventually as well too. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, Daniel. I really do appreciate you joining and sharing your experience. And for the viewers watching, no, there's not a single one of his products in the background of his video. You have a very unique product, so I don't think there's any situation where people would be able to like not necessarily find out, but like the fact that you've already built a brand. This is one huge thing as well too. When you build a brand, it doesn't matter if other people sell your product as well too, because you have your customers, you own your customers. That's all it is at the end of the day. The largest brands aren't scared about like other people ripping their products or doing things like that. It's because you've now built a brand and you're going to continuously grow that brand and your customers see you as the one-stop shop for that particular product.
one of the things I was come to almost like the conclusion of is if you're building a brand, you're building a drop shipping or whatever that's how you start off. Eventually over the years, you're marketing your customers, and this is part of it, email customer retention experience as a whole is going to get so much better where your brand is now recognizable, at least in front of the consumers and more people. If there was another person selling on TikTok Shop or Amazon, they will seem like the knockoff.
Correct. They'll be like, "Oh, where'd you get this from?" "Oh, I got it from Amazon." It'll never be from the retailer of choice versus in your case, when you have that brand image in place, then it'll be, "Oh, I got it from so-and-so's brand." That's definitely a huge thing that a lot of people overlook and the clear difference between a brand and a drop shipping store. That being said, Daniel, thank you so much once again. I hope you had a great time and, in the future, look forward to having you on as well too.
Can I share some interesting numbers actually?
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Go for it.
Yeah, so I have some numbers over here. Well, we started working together mid Q3 of last year, and then we were in full swing probably Q4 in terms of revenue for my brand, increased for us 85% compared to the previous year. That's not only what we've done here, I've done some work on the front end, but having the really strong back end has also helped increase. Returning customer rates increased from 15% and then another 23% in Q1 of this year. So the customers that started are now continuing to buy, which is great for overall revenue. And then this is the most interesting one. Percentage of sales from email Q3 of last year compared to the previous year was up 500%.
Yeah.
So
Which
it's
very evidently makes sense because the three like it was bouncing around like 3 to 5%. Eventually, some months, naturally Q4 will boost you, and I think you got up to like maybe 6-7%. But yeah, 5% to 25%, especially at the scale that you're at, is a no-brainer, right? Like for any seven-figure and like per year pushing seven figures, it just 500% increase on the retention is ridiculous.
Yeah, I honestly think I should have done it sooner than than waiting for, I don't know, Q3 of last year. But hindsight, and also there's no better time to start than right now. It could always be hindsight, but yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. I really do appreciate you breaking that down. And yeah, I mean, aside from that, I hope you have an amazing next 6 to 12 months, regardless of what's happening with the business. I know we're going to be by your side helping you out, but regardless, man, I really do appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you guys. I appreciate you as well and look forward to continuing to work together.
Take care, man. Appreciate it.